I'm sick of seeing Joe the Unifier. This card is everywhere. It's the 12th most popular commander, but I love playing Legends. What does Amanda do? I have an option now. It's Cleopatra from the Assassin's Creed set. As a reincarnation of Julius Caesar, this deck has a special place in my heart. Cleopatra, Exiled Pharaoh is 2 black-green. This human noble is going to allow you to put counters on up to 2 legendary creatures, and Betrayal, whenever a legendary creature with counters on it dies, you draw a card for each counter on it and lose 2 life. So what is the strategy with this deck? 1, we want to put counters on all of our legends. 2, we want to sacrifice them. And 3, we want to bring them back to keep it going. Now here are the counters cards we're using. Arwen, Weaver of Hope, is going to allow every other creature to enter the battlefield with some counters on it equal to Arwen's toughness. So if we get counters on her, our creatures get even bigger. Our Spiky Boy, Bristly Bill, Spine Sower, is going to let counters be placed on our creatures when they land ETBs. And then he can allow all the counters to be doubled. Kazur, Ruthless Stalker, is going to allow all of our creatures to get a counter when they deal combat damage, and we're definitely attacking because we want our creatures to die. Speaking of giving ourselves reasons to attack, we have Draena, Liberator of Malakir. When she deals combat damage to a player, each other attacking creature gets a +1/+1 counter. Forgotten Ancient is one of the best +1/+1 counters cards, because whenever a spell gets cast, he gets a counter, and we spread those counters around during our upkeep. Grakmaw, Skyclave Rager comes into play with 3 counters, and whenever another creature with a counter on it dies, Grakmaw gets a counter. Lets us store our counters, almost like an Ozolith. No counters deck is complete without Hardened Scales. It just gives you an additional +1/+1 counter when +1/+1 counters are placed on something. Mazarek, Krull, Death Priest is probably one of the best cards in the deck, because whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. We're sacking creatures, and I'm sure our opponents will be sacking treasures. Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, is like Hardened Scales. It's going to give us an additional 1/1 counter when we place them, but it also gives the advantage of being able to place 1/1 counters. Guess what? We have another card like Hardened Scales. It's Pure Imaginative Rascal. Just gives you more counters. That's it. Renata, Call to the Hunt, is going to let every other creature enter the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on it. Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, is going to allow us to save our counters up when our creatures dies and put them on another creature. That way we can get more cards in the future. Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, is the little counter guy who could. He's going to get counters, he's going to keep him through zones, then we can keep sacrificing him over and over and over to keep drawing cards. Slurk, the All-Ingesting, comes into play with 5 counters, and then whenever another creature dies that has counters on it, all of our other counter creatures get more counters. Sarak and Goreclaw are going to give all of our other creatures +1/+1 counters when they ETB. They're also going to get haste, so we can start swinging real quick. Now on to the Ozolith, the best counters card in the game. It's going to store up all of our counters, let them put them on a creature, then we'll sack their creature. Ozolith will get more counters, we'll get cards, we're winning. Varolz, the Scar Striped, is going to allow our creatures that are in the graveyard to become counters for other creatures. Then it's also a sacrifice outlet to help us draw more cards. Vorinclex, Monstrous Raiders, is going to double our counters on our creatures. He's also a legend, so keep that in mind. Now that our legends are covered up with counters, let's sacrifice them to draw those cards. Ashnod, Flesh Mechanist, is going to allow us to sacrifice creatures when she attacks, give us some Power Stones. What good will those do? I don't know. Iara, First of Lothwain, is going to give us a drain effect when black creatures enter the battlefield, and also lets us sacrifice black creatures to draw a card on our own. Then we get cards from all those counters as well. Braid's Arisen Nightmare is going to allow us to sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker at our end step, but we're going to sacrifice legendary creatures to draw cards from Braids and draw cards from all those counters. God Eternal Bantu is going to give us a massive burst of card draw. It's going to sacrifice a ton of our legends, draw cards from him, and draw cards from all those crazy counters. Azoni the Thousand Eye is going to give us a ton of 1/1 insect creatures, which we don't really care about at all. I mean, at all. What we do care about is that she's a legend that will let us sacrifice creatures to let us draw cards. Gerard, Golgari Lichlord, is going to allow us to sacrifice creatures to drain our opponents. We can also sacrifice some lands to bring him back, so if he's the sacrificial lamb, we're going to keep getting cards from him. Siphorus Nightmare Speaker is going to allow us to sacrifice creatures to mill some cards, and then we can get those cards in our hands if our opponents are being stingy with their life total. Finally, we have Yahini, Undying Partisan. This legendary Aetherborn vampire is going to allow us to sacrifice our board to make him indestructible and get some cards. You see the theme by now. We have legendary creatures that love to sacrifice other legendary creatures. So what are we going to do now that we've sacrificed our entire board and have a full grip of cards? We're going to recur those legends to repeat the process. Animate Dead is going to allow us to get a creature out of any graveyard. We're probably going to choose ours, but if our opponents have a juicy target, we're taking it. Chainer Dementia Master is going to give all of our nightmares a boost, but that doesn't make any sense. This is a Legends deck, but it is. It's going to recur all of our legends as nightmares and boost them, but when we lose Chainer, we lose our legends. I can risk it. Honest Rutstein is just a Gravedigger that costs way less mana and it's legendary, and ignore his second line of text. We're not going to use that. Since we are in a Golgari Aristocrats deck at heart, Marin fits in perfectly. We're going to get a ton of experience counters and keep reanimating our legends to reuse them for value. Say we get into a situation where we have no good ways to put counters on our creatures. We have Machias the Unhallowed. He's going to give all of our creatures Undying, so when they come back they get a counter so we can sack them and get some cards. We have to include the best reanimation card in all of Magic the Gathering. It's Reanimate. Where do you think that term reanimation came from in the game? It's Reanimate, silly. Finally, we have our last card, Whisper Blood Liturgist. It's going to allow us to sacrifice 2 creatures to get some cards, and then return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. It does everything this deck wants to do. That about wraps it up. Hopefully you like this quick deck tech on a Golgari Legends Commander, Cleopatra. If you want to see the full deck list, it's in the description and it's on Moxfield. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.